Hi everyone, welcome to our Q&A on ocean rowing with Barry Hayes and David Murray, who have rowed numerous oceans between them and who are here today to shed some light on the experiences. This should help to build a picture of what Team Seasoar are going through on the Atlantic at the moment as part of the world's toughest row, raising funds for Lyme Disease UK. So welcome Barry and David, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
No,
Thank
honestly,
you.
it's really grateful. So a little bit about Barry. Barry is the founder of Shark Bait Socials, which you can't miss on his hat. A good bit of promotion. It's a social media service for extreme adventures, and he's currently managing Team Seasoar's social media account as well as some of the other teams while they're currently at sea. And after his dad fell into a coma, Barry decided to fill his life with amazing experiences, which included rowing across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about that soon. And David is also a serial adventure sportsman and a good friend of John Watling and the inspiration behind John Watling taking on the challenge. So you're to blame, David, for that. But also, you've embarked on numerous grueling challenges, including an Atlantic row, where you and your partner achieved a world record for the oldest pair to row across any ocean. So that is a very cool achievement. You've also
Youngest.
also built a successful software development company and channeled your energy into fundraising. And you've created a new adventure called Be Your Own Best Version to advise future teams on securing sponsors and working with charities. So collectively, you both have so much knowledge about the actual sport, but also working with the charities too, which is really cool. So I think this will be a really informative session. So if you're happy, I'd like to dive straight into our questions, which is we'd
Absolutely.
love to hear how both of you got into ocean rowing. I know you've touched on it briefly, Barry, in your bio, but would love to hear a bit more from both of you.
Yeah, David, or do you want to go first?
Oh, Barry, no, absolutely.
Oh, okay. So yeah, as you sort of mentioned in the bio, I've sort of had a very ordinary life, and then my dad got very ill. He was in a coma, and we got given this, told he was going to pass away, and we got given this leaflet about coping with loss. And I remember thinking at the time, like, if he dies tomorrow, then he's had an incredibly awful, but he's had this incredible life. He's been all around the world and been in the military, and he's sort of had all these amazing stories about the jungles of Belize and the deserts of Iraq and the penguins of Antarctica, all this amazing stuff. And we were all incredibly proud of him. But then I started thinking, like, if I died tomorrow, sorry to make it so dark at the very beginning of the conversation, but if I died tomorrow, how would my at the time 7-year-old be proud of me? And I appreciate that 7-year-olds are proud of people for different reasons, but in my mind, I hadn't done anything that would make 7-year-old me super proud, and that was kind of what sparked me to go and do something. I didn't know that ocean rowing existed. I didn't know it was a thing to do, but all of a sudden, I wanted to do something, and I think something like that kind of trigger moment opens up all these opportunities that are whizzing past all the time, and you just don't see them. And for me. I was, as with most stupid ideas, I was staggering back home from the pub at 1:30 in the morning. I think I've been celebrating the fact that it was a Tuesday, and I was sort of flicking through my phone on Facebook, and I saw this guy that was looking for people to row across the Pacific with him. It was part of the very first Pacific race, ocean rowing race, and yep. Long story short, I sort of quickened my stagger home, and we became friends, and we set up this team and rode across the Pacific. Yeah, absolutely.
As you do. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really, really inspiring story. And how about you, David? How did you get the bug for ocean rowing?
Similar way to Barry, really. As it all stems with one's father. My dad had a really good friend and guy. My father sadly passed away, and I'd just come back I managed to break my neck coming off my push bike,
Oh my.
and Guy, who was my dad's best friend, said, phoned me up out of the blue, and said he was looking for somebody to row an ocean with, and he'd been through his whole black book and had run out of people to ask. So I think I was his last chance saloon. Um, and yeah, so I didn't know it was a thing. So he sent me a YouTube clip. I looked at it, got permission from my wife, and she said, "Yeah, if it makes you happy." The next day, I phoned him back and said, "Yeah, come, let's do this thing." And it was just yeah, that was one of those sort of little sliding door moments in life where your whole life will sort of pivot on a almost a 360-degree.
Yeah.
And yes, that's how it started. I mean, it was yeah, incredible. And I would hasten to add that one of the best finds that we had was working with shark bait and with uh,
Oh, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. It seems like,
so
yeah,
we actually go back quite a long way. So like the boys at Seasaw, there's a very tight knit community,
I know.
and it's brilliant, with the guys that we work with. So
It's fantastic. I think it's really lovely to see, and that really shines through this kind of sense of community, that you're all, yeah, you're all sort of in it together, and you know what it's like as well. So it's really wonderful to talk to you and find out a bit more. So thank you for that. And our next question is, how does the actual experience compare to the training? Because obviously, having sort of supported Team Seasoar and being part of their journey, we've seen all the kind of physical training, fitness training, and safety preparation. But how does it actually compare to the real event? Because it's very hard to simulate being at sea for that long and the challenges that you're actually going to face out there. So how did it differ?
I think that you're right. It's almost impossible to simulate what they're taking on at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, and to be perfectly honest, I think most of that is a psychological thing. Physically rowing coastally, which is where all of their training's been done, is actually more challenging, or can be more challenging, because you've got lots more traffic, you've got
Mhm.
rocks, you've got coastal winds, you've got coastal waves, which are much sort of sharper, and it can be a lot more dangerous rowing coastally.
Mhm.
One of the biggest, most dangerous parts of an ocean row is the beginning and the end, because you're right next to the islands. Um, but actually, there's no getting around it. Being 1,000 miles from any piece of land is psychologically a really testing thing.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that I hear quite a lot from rowers, and I don't know if you found this, David, was that there's so much sort of, it's really scary leaving that morning that you're starting an ocean row. It's really, really scary.
Yeah.
But then you sort of build up and build up and build up to it, and it's this enormous, great big thing. But certainly my first row, when I sort of rowed away to sea, as land started to disappear, and I thought it would be the scariest point, actually it was this huge sigh of relief. It's such a lot of work to get to the start line. It's years of work to get to the start line. There's so much training and so many courses to do and so much learning, and suddenly you're there, and that's all you've got to do is row in a straight line. And actually it can be almost a bit of a relief, moving out there.
That's
So yeah,
so
that's sort of my sort of thoughts about it.
yeah, and you can't really prepare that when you're doing the coastal training because you've got land in sight. So actually to lose sight of land and then be like, this is it. I can imagine that's a really sort of yeah, pivotal moment, as you say. And how about
Yeah.
for you, David? How did you find your training versus the experience?
very much as Barry's explained, it was extraordinary as you because when you train in the UK, you go round in a circle.
Yeah.
So you go out round and back again, and we did do from A to B just to that, but the tides have a big issue, and yeah, it's chalk and cheese. Psychologically, and I say this to a lot of teams, psychologically, you have to prepare almost as much as the physical side.
Yes.
And I don't know, you see all these teams powering out the watts and things, and they're you get the teams like the Mark Slats of this world who are just machines. I mean, they're just the awesome rowers,
Yeah.
and you get people that almost spend too much on that side
Hmm.
and not enough with the mental preparation for, as Barry described, when you lose the sight of land.
Yeah.
It is a relief, and it's extraordinary because suddenly you're going, well, at 2 hours on, 2 hours off, whatever your shift pattern, that tends to be the thing. And
Yeah.
how you've got to train for that, but you can't because suddenly it's, do I go to bed now? For the first night, I couldn't work that through. Do I go to
Yeah.
bed? Do I stay up? Do I row a bit more? Do I, so yeah, it
And
is an extraordinary experience.
so I imagine you kind of zoom in once you lose sight of land, the distractions are gone, you're just on that boat and you're just focusing. And yeah, I can only imagine, but it must be a very strange feeling. And And it's interesting, even the updates from Seesaw that we've had, they've been saying the rowing isn't the hardest part. It's everything around it and the
Yeah.
sleeping, the cooking, all of that, taking care of yourself. And the actual rowing itself is not necessarily the hardest bit. Whereas I think for a lot of people on land, you think the endurance of the rowing is going to be the hardest bit. So it's interesting how it differs. Really, really interesting. And so I know both of you are quite keen to go back and do it again. I mean, obviously, Barry, you've done a few, but what is it about it? And I know, David, you're thinking about it again as well. What is it that sucks you back in? I mean, surely if you've done it once, you've achieved it. So what is it about life on that boat that sucks you back in?
Um, it's very difficult to put my finger on it, to be honest. And I think a lot of the time, people get to the other side and saying, "I never want to see a boat again. Burn all the boats." But then there's this sort of, it just sort of creeps back in, and it's it is an incredibly harsh place to live. You know, living all of your waking life is outside, and you're in a saltwater environment, and the sun is beating down on you. And if it rains, you feel the rain. If it if it's sunny, you feel the sun. And there's no escape from it. And going into the cabin is no respite because it's so hot, and it can be really pretty horrible. But at the same time, um, you've got nothing else to do. You are just focusing on one thing, and that's really rare in our day-to-day life. You know, there's always emails, and I've got to go here, and I've got to do there, and I'm in the traffic jam, and to have that just total sort of we talk a lot about being present,
Mhm.
and you're just totally present the whole time that you're out there. So it's a really
Yeah,
very special place to be, and a really beautiful place to be. You know,
yeah.
when you've got the sunrises and the sunsets, and you've got the Milky Way and the shooting stars and the bioluminescence in the water, and uh, it's a very special place to be, and it's sort of the thing you can only experience if you're out there in an unpowered craft in the middle of nowhere. It's a very special place.
That's wonderful. Because I was going to say what it brings you, but actually, it's that it brings you a complete digital detox, distraction detox. You
Mm.
have to be focused. It's survival, so you're focused on that one task in a small space. But then you've got the vastness of the ocean and nature. So I can imagine it's a real sort of juxtaposition of both. And David, would you agree with that? What would you say? You know, what's your sort of motivation for going back and possibly doing it again if you end up doing that?
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, what's interesting is when you see the teams come in, you can see the dynamics of the teams,
Yeah.
and some get it and some don't. And I've written this little thing about, so Atlantic Campaigns is run by a great team, and at the head of it is Carsten, and he's the most incredible man ever. And I always remember when I was leaving, he is the last person that shakes you by the hand.
Oh,
And and he'll look at you, and he looks right into your soul.
yeah.
And the first person that you see 53 days later, as we were, 53 days later, you arrive in a small island of Antigua, and the first person you meet and shakes you by the hand is Carsten.
Wow.
And
Is it
and he
bookending this amazing odyssey?
Oh, it is, and you've got this weird thing in the middle, which is, as Barry described, you have massive highs and lows, and it is quite incredible. But he turned around to me, and when he said, "Oh, you've changed. You get this."
Oh,
And if somebody said to me, "Turn around and row back again," oh, in a heartbeat.
really?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like
There's
getting off a
something.
scary ride and wanting to do it again.
Oh, it was scary. It was great. It was terrifying. You know, we had Guy and I had massive ups and massive downs, and
Yeah.
things didn't work, and that's the same that the boys at Seesaw are going through. But at the end of the day, it's the rawness. And I talk a lot to Guy, who I rode with, and say, "Come, let's do it again." And you know, we were the youngest, I mean, oldest pair to row and any ocean. And you know, Guy at 68 when he did it was quite incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm still saying to him, "Come on, let's do it
Let's
again."
do it
And
again. Is he
yeah,
tempted?
yeah. Oh yeah, he always sends me this smiley
Yeah.
emoji. So
That's a good sign. You've obviously it brings you so much, even though,
oh yeah,
for somebody who's not as adventurous, it sounds like an absolute nightmare. But I think the fact that it's got this draw is wonderful. And
yeah.
And also the fact there's a testament to the team as well that Carsten makes it so personal and that he's seeing you off and
Yeah.
welcoming you back. It's a personal organization, which is fantastic as well. And Barry, how do you feel the oceans that you've rode? I know you haven't done the Atlantic, but you've done the Pacific and the Indian. How do they differ? I mean, I'm guessing sharks might be an answer, but how do they differ?
So I think any ocean can be the toughest ocean on its day.
Yeah.
That I don't think any that there's I don't think any's home to particularly bigger waves or anything like that.
No.
The Indian Ocean was so the Pacific was the first race, and the Pacific race goes from California to Hawaii, so it's not the full Pacific. It's
Mhm.
2,400 miles, but the Indian was a lot longer.
Yeah.
Was that 3,800 miles, something like that. So it's a long time at sea. That was 70 days. So it's yeah, we were all quite puffed out at the end of that one.
Yeah.
And generally, I think that the Indian is sort of generally thought of as one of the hardest ones to do.
Mhm.
But it's just a big expanse of water full of sharks, and whether it's the Atlantic or the Pacific or the Indian,
You've got
it's
you've got
it's a challenging place, but a brilliant place, and I think they all bring their own thing.
Fantastic. It's really good. And David, how did it feel to win a world record? Because not only you completed the race, but to actually get this extra, honor. How did that feel?
The gong. That was it. As I said, to me, it was great to get that, but I wish it was for the youngest.
No, I think it's more
Um,
of an achievement when you're older because you put your
well,
body through more. You
no,
probably wouldn't
I
probably get
mean,
it again. You'll probably beat your own record if you do it again.
well, that's what I keep on saying to Guy. Let's go back again and let's get it back. But
Yes, defend your title.
and I think he would if he could. But I mean, again, I mean, the toll it takes on your body is one thing. I really prepared well, and physically, absolutely fine,
Yeah.
and mentally as well. But I think, yeah, the world record. Yeah, I want to be the youngest. I'd like to, I will, may perhaps I'll look at another record of some sort. Maybe, the youngest combined age if I can get some more people on the boat. Anyway,
Fantastic. No, it has a whole extra dimension to it when you won that as well. Yes, it's something that you can definitely, as you say, thinking up new world records to collect. Fantastic. And then for both of you, what would you say the highs and lows were? If you had to encapsulate what really stood out as your high and your low, what would you say for your rowing?
I think I think there's lots of lows.
Yeah.
I think that for me, I think in one 24-hour period on the Indian Ocean, I probably had my highest high and my lowest low. So we were
Wow.
sort of we were rowing across and we had horrendous weather, really, really terrible storms. We did capsize on that row.
Yeah.
There was an awful lot of bad things happening. And we'd spent about 3, 4 weeks trying to sort of battle our way across. We'd spent 10 days rowing in the same direction, and at the end of that 10 days, we were backwards from where we
Um,
were 10 days prior. So just rowing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and ending up backwards was sort of soul destroying.
yeah.
But yeah, 3 weeks of that ended up, we were sort of even contemplating, well, are we going to have to go back to Australia? And it was just like, I'm not a rich person. I worked at the time I was working in a post room in a bank, earning pretty much minimum wage,
Yeah.
and I put everything into this. Like that, everything was on the
Yeah.
line for this, and the concept of going back to Australia was totally. It was just the most awful thing that I can think of. I'd let everyone down, and so I had this awful moment. I'd also just been hit in the face, and I had like split my eye, so that was bleeding. I
Oh
just remember
dear.
being in tears in the boats, going, "This is
Yeah.
the worst thing ever." And then the same day, later that day, these amazing, absolutely enormous whales came up alongside us, and they sort of came up to the boat and they sort of circled the boat, spent about an hour circling the boat, and there was one that just sort of lay alongside the boat for about 20 minutes, and you've got this enormous whale eye just staring at you, and you're looking into this creature's soul, and it's just the most phenomenal connection with nature that I've ever had, with these absolute gigantic sort of dinosaur style creatures that were just gently nudging the boat, and they could clearly wipe you out in one go, but were just very, very gently touching the boat. And and we hadn't gone to SeaWorld to see them, and we hadn't even gone on a whale watching tour. We
Yeah.
they were, we'd watched them migrating, and we'd seen lots of them migrating, but these ones came to have a look at us and
Yeah.
spent time looking at us. So
The
yeah, that
fact that
was
they
in
were
like a
gentle.
24-hour period. Yeah, and so super gentle. So to go from sort of like, yeah, the absolute lowest of the lows on that trip to the highest of the highs on that trip was interesting in just a
Yeah.
24-hour period.
And emotional as well. I can imagine there's, yeah, so much
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah. How about you, David? What stands out for you as your highs and your lows?
I mean, just really to just build upon what Barry said is about the whales. I mean, we had an encounter all night with a whale, and I still remember that, and it was a high very much that because you could hear it, the blowhole going,
Mm.
and it was, and then this eye comes up. So it's who is in the zoo. So we were in the zoo, and
Yes.
we were in their sort of playground, and I was going to write a children's book called The Whale That Winks, because
Oh,
I to this moment remember this eye coming up, and it sort of just looks at you, and they're so dark, it's like darker than dark,
yeah.
and it just like winked at you like that and went down, and then you saw it off, and you saw these two dorsal fins going off, so mother and baby. But
Oh, wow.
they weren't really afraid of us, they were inquisitive,
Yeah.
but that was extraordinary. That was obviously a definite high. I
Yeah.
mean, the lows, the high for me as well is we often because Guy was a really good friend of my dad's, and I really appreciated him asking me, although I was at the end of the list, I really appreciated him asking me to row. It was a privilege to do that, and that doing the whole row was a massive high.
Yeah.
And lows, I mean, there's always lows, and I tend not to focus on those. I mean, sleep was a big thing.
Yeah.
Get so immensely tired. But again, I prepared as much as I could for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, you those blend into, going, you tend to forget the lows and always remember the highs, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's wonderful. You take away these highs despite the really tough moments. And so I know you sort of touched a little bit about how you actually felt relief when you lost sight of land. But if somebody said, what's the psychological impact of being at sea for that long? How would you answer that? Like, what do you what's going through your mind when you haven't seen land, you're stuck on a boat with, in very sort of close quarters with people? What's your sort of thought processes in terms of what you're missing, what's your experience?
I think everyone's tackles that slightly differently,
Yeah,
but I do think that I mean there's the obvious things that people sort of they obviously miss their families
yeah,
and you miss cold drinks and real food because all you're eating is dehydrated rations generally.
yeah.
Um, I when I left, my partner gave me an envelope with I think it was about 35 photographs, like physical photographs in it, and I think 30 of them were of my dog. So I just sort of like I missed my dog.
She got it
Um,
right too.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that's pretty good. But I think psychologically, it's a really, really challenging thing. I think
Of
that's
course.
part of what this is. Physically,
And
it's pulling on some oars, and
yeah,
that's doable. All right, there's people that are going to be stronger at that than others, but that's doable for most people.
yeah,
It's the psychological challenge that's the most difficult. But
yeah,
I think it's about there's always going to be negative thoughts, and I don't think that you can quash those negative thoughts or stop those negative thoughts. You've just got to take the positive thoughts and make them louder, and
yeah,
celebrate those positive thoughts. And that can help you get through because it is a huge, huge thing. And coming back to land can be a real challenge. I think coming back to land is part of that psychological challenge. If you're doing this sort of like incredible thing, which is life or death decisions every 5 minutes, and you're having, Milky Ways and whales and flares and excitement, and then suddenly you're back in the office,
yeah,
and you know, Gareth from Three Desks Down is losing his mind because someone's borrowed his stapler without filling out the correct form. You're like, I can't manage this. This is really difficult to sort of plop yourself back into normal society again.
yeah,
So that I think is also part of that huge journey that Seesaw will have to navigate.
of course.
It's actually coming back to normality is possibly just as big a challenge.
Yeah, and we all feel it just going on holiday. So I can't imagine being at sea for that,
Yeah.
going through this amazing sort of personal growth and sort of experiencing that. And seeing land again, was that because obviously you felt relief when you lost the land? Was there relief when you saw Antigua? Was that just or were you kind of regret, do you not want to get off the boat? I'm intrigued.
David, I didn't go to
Oh,
Antigua, so you can answer that
oh,
one.
of course.
Of course.
No, no. I
Whatever
mean,
whatever land you're going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, David.
I mean, I mean, again, going back to the psychological side, we did have a mindfulness coach to
Oh,
help us
brilliant.
prepare, and I my mum was really into the mindfulness, and so I practiced it a lot. And you had all the mantras you whiz around your head.
Yeah.
But so we had, on the mental side, we had great preparation at
Yeah.
all. And I loved the mental hardship. I don't know whether that's just weirdness in me. But I do remember the first storm being terrified, and
Mhm.
then we had a fairly okay crossing, but the third and fourth sort of lumpy days again. I remember standing on deck and shouting at Mother Nature, "Is that all she's got?
Oh,
Make it harder." I
I love
wanted to
it.
really feel that sort of the force of Mother Nature, and that to me was how I prepared.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to knock me down, but I think, as you said, when you do see land, I don't know how Barry felt, but when I just remember when we were trying to time it because we weren't going to break any records at all. Apart from being old, but we weren't going to be the fastest or anything like that. At one stage we were due to come in about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
and then we decided that we would just stop rowing, and we made a meal, and Guy and I sat there and we chatted, and we were probably about, I don't know, 30, 40 miles away, so we couldn't quite see Antigua. I just remember that evening having the most incredible evening where we were really relaxed. There was no rush to get in. We were bobbing along, and then we were visited by two birds. And I thought that was a reincarnation of my mum and my dad, because they weren't talking to each other. They were one on one
Oh.
side and one on the other side. And then we were having a really nice chat about all these bits and bobs. And then I just remember seeing the lights of Antigua coming through, and then out of the dist after this, we had this roar of this boat came out, and he wasn't on AIS, which is the identification for other boats. This roar of this boat came out, and it was a local fishing boat, and
Oh.
the captain, had rowed 3 or 4 years before. And so he was an Antiguan guy. And he came out and said, "Oh, welcome to Antigua. Hope you guys are having a good time." And I just was absolutely amazed that suddenly there was like a human
Another
interaction.
interaction.
Yeah. And then you sort of go in, and this circus takes over. And
Yeah.
the boys will experience. I don't know
Yeah.
what your incoming was like, Barry, but coming into Antigua, was incredible, because you go across this physical line, not physical, but this line, and then you hear this gun go off, and then Ian Couch, that is a legend in the rowing community, works for World's Toughest Row Atlantic campaigns, and you hear him shouting, and there's a flare going
Oh.
off, and it's like, oh my word. And then the weirdest thing is, talk about the psychological side, is you then have to stop rowing.
Yes, and that's been your life.
And it's like, oh my God. So, and then the media boat comes out, and they all do donuts around you, and the boat's rocking. You've got your flare shot going off.
Yeah.
And then, and so you then have this magical 10 minutes where you row into Antigua, and you go past all these fancy restaurants, and they're all shouting and screaming at you, and well done, boys. And then you go, because there's a big ship yachting thing that goes on at the same time, and you go past this whole array of big, multi-million-pound yachts, and all the staff are on the spit ends at the front, all
Oh.
shouting, and all the horns are going off, and it's just, you go from this basic living
Yeah.
suddenly,
A
uh,
party.
part of it, but I almost didn't want it.
Yes, you just
And
want to kind
then,
of
and then,
get
and
onto
then you see
land
the
quietly without this big fanfare. I can imagine it's a bit overwhelming when you've just had this kind of microcosm of a
yeah,
world for all this time, you know? So
it
that's
was, yeah.
so interesting. And what's the toughest part physically? I mean, would you say it's, I'd be really interested if somebody said what's the toughest part physically. Barry, what would you say?
Um, physically, I think probably is the is probably the sleep deprivation, and
Yeah.
it becomes fine, but it's that first few days, that first possibly week, where your body just gets beaten into submission, and that people talk about, you need to have proper REM sleep where you dream, and so there's the proper restorative sleep, and you have to have that to survive. But you don't get, and that takes 90 minutes to drop into REM sleep, but you rarely, I mean, you only get 90 minutes sleep really at any one stage. So the guys on Team Seesaw, they'll never sleep for more than 90 minutes in the
Mhm.
entire time they're out there, probably.
Yeah.
And so they shouldn't drop into REM sleep. Now, I don't know if I don't think there's been any specific studies done on it, but one way or another, your body just suddenly starts to acknowledge the fact that it isn't getting any sleep, and you just seem to be able to just go straight into what feels like REM sleep, certainly with some sort of restorative sleep,
Yeah.
very, very quickly. But for that first week where your body's fighting this off,
Yeah.
um, it's hard, and there can be, and a lot of people are seasick, but also, there's hallucinations, and visual hallucinations, and auditory hallucinations, and you're hearing things and seeing things, and it's really, really challenging that first few days, but it settles. It does settle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fine after that.
So, so interesting. David, would you agree with that? Do you have anything to add on the physical challenges for you?
Yeah, funny enough, I've never really spoken about the sleep deprivation, but Barry, what you've just said there was, yeah, I can really relate to it. It takes that week and that REM. I mean, I was getting sleep was always no problem. It was the getting up when the alarm went off, and you had that sort of 10 minutes to get onto the oars because you never
Um,
want to let your teammate down.
no.
Yeah, so the boys at Seesaw, that's what they'll be, but they would have fully adjusted by now.
Yeah, wonderful. And
Mm.
how would you say that they were feeling? I know it's difficult, but sort of roughly halfway point, for any sort of rowing campaign that you're doing, what is that like when you realize you're halfway?
I think that the halfway point is absolutely enormous, and it
Mhm.
will be a real celebration.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it will be a real celebration, and it's amazing. You get to halfway, and suddenly there's always this doubt. Can I actually physically do this? There's
Yeah.
people that have done it. That's lovely. I've done all this training. That's lovely. But can I physically do this? And it's always, I think, or perhaps it's just me, but this is sort of nagging doubt. Can I physically do this? Until you get to the halfway point, and then unquestionably everything that you can do it, because everything you've got to do is less than what you've already done. So
Yeah.
you know that everything you've got to do is less, and it continually gets smaller what you've got to achieve. And it's a psychologically massive thing. The only caveat with Team Seesaw, and we're about to put out a video actually after this call, is that Sam is actually carrying his father's ashes on this row, and he dropped them in the sea at halfway. So yesterday he's dropped his father's ashes in
I
the
remember him
water.
saying about that. Very emotional. Very, very
Yeah, it's a really
emotional.
emotional video. We're only getting satellite calls from him. We haven't got any videos, but
Yeah, of
he's left
course.
this incredibly emotional satellite call, which we'll be putting out shortly. But
Yeah.
so for him, I imagine it was incredibly conflicting. It's
Mm.
this huge moment where suddenly you're on the downhill straight. Yet I don't know. Maybe perhaps it was also a release as well. But it's a really monumental moment in particularly Sam's life.
Of course, such a milestone. And to do it at
Mm,
that point as well is very poignant, isn't it?
yeah.
For sure. And how about you, David? How are you feeling when you reach the halfway point? And I can imagine you're putting yourself in Team Seasor's shoes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to say, I spoke to Sam also. I mean, he was telling me about his dad, and I mean, I've lost my dad, Barry. I know you've lost yours, and Sam as well. And it's a very poignant moment. And I think I could think of nothing better that Sam could do. That it's a magical place. The weather's right, but I was likened halfway to it's all downhill from there
Mm-hmm.
going around. It literally is downhill. So
Yeah.
I think that's better. I always remember the call we had, when we got the halfway mark, because on each line of longitude, we had a chocolate egg, and that was, and then so when we hit the halfway mark, we had two. So
Oh,
we had one
fantastic.
each, so I didn't have to share mine with Guy. But yeah,
I love that. It's a really good way of marking it, isn't it? That's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah. It was very special.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And what was the recovery time like for both of you when you reached your various shores? Did it take a long time?
On the Pacific row, I had there's something you get on both of them. It took about 2 or 3 days for me to be able to walk in a straight line because
Wow.
you don't you've got sort of like almost the opposite of seasickness. You sort of get land sickness or
Yeah.
wobbly legs kind of thing. You can get that when you're just getting off a ferry.
Yeah.
But also, you haven't walked anywhere for, okay, my first trip was 45, second one was 70 days. So you haven't walked anywhere for that period of time. There's nowhere
Mhm.
to walk to. So the most you might do is step over someone, but really you're shuffling from your seat to the cabin and then back
Yeah.
again. That's all you're doing. So although you have strong sort of glutes and major rowing muscles, you lose all the fine muscles that help you balance.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people get to the other end and promptly fall over. It took about 2 or 3 days to get that back. One of the things I didn't have it on my Indian row, so I'd sort of got a bit more wise to it. But on the first row, I got quite bad. They call it claw hands. So your hands sort of around oars all the time. But then
Yeah.
when you go to sleep, you wake up and your hands are like
Oh,
claws, and you sort of having to sort
wow.
of force them over the oar handles in the morning. It's incredibly painful.
Yeah.
But it calms after sort of 5 minutes, 10 minutes of rowing.
Mhm.
But I found myself waking up, having showers about 3 weeks after getting back to the UK after the first one, still sort of with these little clawed hands in the mornings where I was having to try and open them up. So that took a little while to get used to.
So interesting. And how about you, David? Did you have similar symptoms when you arrived back?
Yeah, I mean, to get your land legs back, would took 2 or 3 days. And I always remember the next day you go down and you clear out the boat,
Yeah.
and I was like, you like, I mean, it's almost like you're drunk. But I remember as soon as I sat on board to clear it out, absolutely fine. Although it was
Wow.
moored up on the harbour, so there's the psychological, maybe I don't know what it is, but your eyes used to seeing the long horizon or something.
Yeah.
I mean, the claw hands, I was fine because we did these piano hands.
Yeah.
So you get off the oars and do piano hands. A guy still has problems with his hands, or despite him doing that, because we used to. Um, but uh, I would say the big thing for me was going back into a supermarket.
Oh, it
It
must
was
be like
really
a
hard.
sensory overload.
Yeah, and that was that was the yeah. But no, I think recovery time was great. And as I said, I wanted to go back again. So.
Yeah, I know, but something, yeah, something, it did something for you. And what about the sort of, I mean, talk about Team Seesaw, the problems that they've had, the challenges they've had with the capsize, the broken auto helm, and the dagger board. How is that going to be affecting their crossing, would you say?
So I mean, they've experienced just about the worst thing that you can experience in ocean rowing. That was a serious capsize. It wasn't sort of a quick sort of dip in the water and back again.
No.
They were in the water for a good length of time trying to sort
Yeah.
the boat out. Now, that's as terrifying as I think it can get.
Yeah.
I've not experienced anything as severe as I've capsized, but it was a fairly quick experience.
Yeah.
It's a really tough thing to deal with.
And flooding the
So that
cabin as
is
well. Flooding the cabin because then you
Absolutely,
yeah.
and so it took a while to get the boat back on its back over, and it's really, 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 really difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
So that's going to have been physically challenging, but psychologically extremely tough, and it would have taken days to get over that. And you will have seen their tracker was quite slow for the next 3 days, where they
Yeah.
were on power anchor each night, and there wasn't any physical necessary reason to be on power anchor on those moments. It was probably more about, and I wasn't on the boat, so I can't say for certain, but looking at the tracker, it seems like it was more of a psychological thing. Look, it's pitch dark, the winds and the waves are terrifying. We need to absolutely get ourselves together again. Let's go on power anchor for the evening. So we saw them do that for about 3 days. Um, Having the cabins flooded meant all the water helms were damaged beyond repair. They have three, but they because they do fail, and usually you can just replace them. But because the cabins were flooded, they were damaged on the inside. So that was no use. I mean, auto helms are a luxury. Certainly, my first row, I didn't use an auto helm, and
Mhm.
you can manually steer, which is what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's and actually, talking to Niall, they found it's actually a little bit quicker, although it's taking more effort. Actually, the boat is moving a little bit quicker when it's hard because one of them's steering rather than rowing. But
Yeah.
considering there's only one of them rowing half the time, it's going as quicker than they expected because the autohelm's making lots and lots and lots of different changes to the rudder.
Mhm.
So every time it moves in the water, it's adding drag.
Yeah.
Whereas the manual steering is a little bit more sort of intelligent or human intelligent anyway,
Yeah.
as far as going. So that's been helpful to them. And then as far as the dagger board's concerned, so they lost their dagger board. I think it snapped, but anyway, it certainly lost it. That helps them get speed when they've got sort of side-on winds, basically. So
Okay.
if you've sort of, I suppose if you imagine like a slot car, like a Scalextric car, you put it in the slot, and it's got the sort of the little blade that goes in, and if you push the side of it, it will, if you, near the back, it will move the car around, but the front will stay in the slot. If you
Hmm.
then get a fixed blade and stick it near the back of that slot car, and that's kind of like your dagger board, and stick it in the slot. Now, when you push on the side of it, it's not going anywhere. And
Hmm.
if you think of that as your wind, and if that wind is anywhere sort of south of anywhere behind the center of the car or the boat, it actually not only doesn't go sideways, it actually helps move you along.
Okay.
So without a dagger board, they can slide across waves sideways, and that loses loads of power.
Yeah.
But with this dagger board in, it will help them, even with a sort of an angled beam on wind, move forwards. I'm not
Um,
very good at explaining stuff,
no,
but
I think that's a really, really helpful
it's
analogy. We can,
basically, yeah,
yeah,
it will help them make progress when conditions aren't ideal.
yeah,
That's kind and without it, not all boats have dagger boards. Not all ocean
no,
rowing boats have dagger boards. So it's certainly not the end of the world. It does
absolutely.
make it challenging.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about it.
yeah.
But it's completely doable even without a dagger board.
Good. And they've still been able to carry on, which is good. And
Yeah.
David, would you agree with that as well? Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we're all showing our age because I know what a scale electric car is.
So do I. I had them as well. I remember them.
Oh yes.
They're great fun.
Um, but no, I think that goes very well. I mean, but I think in terms of, I mean, Barry, you've capsized. I mean, we've breached a few times when we went, but terrifying. You do train for the capsize,
Yep.
and I think in credit to the boys at Seesaw, I mean, working as a team together in what was pretty rough seas to not only right the boat, get themselves organised, get themselves safe, uh, get the cabin, dry again or as dry as they can. Yeah, I mean there's a hell of a story there,
Yeah.
and well done to them. But I think even more so, it just highlights what the boys are doing,
Yeah.
and I think. I think we need to, people have all got behind them, but there's an incredible story there. And I think, wow,
And the
well
fact that
done
it
to
was
them.
early on as well, the fact that it happened so early, that must be when you're just getting used to everything, and then you've got this huge obstacle that has had quite a knock-on effect with their communications, their obviously their steering, their all of these things. So
But also, and I was thinking about this a lot, and I've had a call with John, but also we spoke about the psychological side of it, but also when they left, the boys wanted a top three finish in their class. They were so psychologically they've had to adjust to the fact that hang on a minute, okay, this our reason is going to change now.
yeah,
We're potentially not going to finish top three,
yeah,
that we're going to still come in and that adjustment you've got to make.
yeah,
And I was talking to somebody about that this morning in terms of what you want to get out of the row, and I hope it means that rather than going hell for leather, sleep row, eat repeat, sleep row, they actually enjoy the wildlife, they
yeah.
enjoy being at one. I mean, there's nowhere else in the world like
No,
the middle of an ocean. I mean, it's extraordinary. I
I
mean, it
totally
really is.
agree.
And you can't tell, you can't, no words can ever paint that picture. But I mean, fairness to them, they've come through it all. They've had their capsized, they've got back on again, and they're now, flying along.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
absolutely. It's wonderful. It's a reminder to enjoy it, isn't it? It's not just about getting there as quickly as possible. It's about taking in this amazing experience that they've trained so hard for. And if sort of friends and family members, supporters, you might be a bit worried, about everything they've been through. And what would be your message, of sort of reassurance to supporters who are maybe a bit worried?
I
Definitely one
think
for
that
Barry.
I think that honestly, I think that ocean rowing, despite all the horror that we've just talked about capsize and stuff, I genuinely think it is actually quite a safe sport. It is a disgusting sport, and you are in some awful situations where it's just horrible. Like so much of the time. But actually, if you took a little two-man, one-man yacht across the Pacific and a massive wave, or what's happened to Seasaw, what happened to that? They've snapped the mast
Yeah.
and they're stuffed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to call a rescue. Whereas, the ocean rowing boats, there's like a little cork, and it just bobbles around on top of everything, and it can go upside down, and it comes back the right way around again. And as long as you make sure that you keep the cabin doors shut, and that was the problem when they capsized. It was on a shift change, so the doors were open, which is
Yes.
why the cabins got flooded. But make sure that those cabin doors are shut. Make sure you're clipped on, which they are. They're absolutely nailed on as far as their drills are concerned. As
Yeah.
long as you do those things, actually, it's an incredibly safe way to cross. I mean, it's the opposite of comfortable, but it's from safety perspective. You could have any sized wave, and it would be dreadful, absolutely horrible. But it would bubble up and it would come to the surface, and you would be able to carry on rowing. So absolutely, I think it's hard for family members to watch loved ones do this,
Yeah.
because there isn't very much communication, and you
No.
are just watching this little dot moving across, and it's really hard being on the sidelines. But safety wise, they're in a really good spot.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And David, what would you like to add to that in terms of,
Oh,
having done it and probably communicate people might be a bit worried about you and then obviously worried about Cecil?
I would say you should never row an ocean without having Barry on board. He, and I mean that because
Oh.
the absolute, you were the consistent because you speak to the charity, you spoke to the family, you spoke to
Yeah.
us, and it's about managing. I mean, I watch Barry now from the safety of my armchair, and I read all your posts,
Yeah, me too. They're
and
great.
I- and I know exactly what you're saying and how you meter out the information. Doesn't
Yes.
matter how bad it is, that it's about. So Barry, what you do is an amazing job in making sure that people know enough to be reassured, but
Yes.
not too much to be frightened. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I can say that as a complete layperson to this. That's how I feel reading your posts, Barry. I think you do a great job and they're
But
really informative as well. We sort of really, you capture what it might be like out there and what it probably is like that out there. So yes, I
thank
agree.
you.
Really, that everyone's lucky to have you on board and
Well,
also for
thank
the
you.
for the guys, because I mean, David, you're a long friend of John. You know ocean rowing. You've got links to obviously Lyme disease with your connections, and you're now you've been hugely helpful to us. What would be your message to Team Seesaw if you had to, what would be if you had to motivate them right now and encourage them? What would you say?
Oh, what would I say is
Yes.
just you're doing an amazing job, guys. I mean, so amazing. I'm absolutely awe of your row. I mean, you guys just, and what you're doing for Lyme disease as well. I know for John, it's really raw and it's personal.
Mhm.
And I would say to anyone, get behind the boys, give as much as you can. I mean, you really, whether it's a little message. So one of the best days we had was when we suddenly got this text message through. Thanks, Barry. You completely broke us, and that was messages from all of our friends.
Oh wow, it must mean so much. I mean, it means a lot when you're on land, but when you're out there, I can
Oh
imagine
yeah.
these messages from the outside world must mean so much.
So what I would say is to all the supporters of Lyme disease of Seesaw is write the boys a message,
Yeah.
get it across to Barry, and just let them know how much how well they're doing. They're brilliant.
They've captivated such a huge community and everybody's dialed in. I mean, everyone I've met is on that
Yeah.
app, glued to it, seeing where they are. So, and Barry, how about you? Because obviously, you're very connected with a lot of different teams, but you do a fantastic job of making the charities connected to each team feel really kind of involved. And again, I would echo what David said about your communication and just your availability to be there on hand. So, if you had to support, send a message of encouragement to Team Seasaw as a fellow ocean rower and organizing all their social media and communications, what would you say?
I think just that they have been overwhelmingly wonderful human beings in this. They have absolutely they've lived they've sort of we've all lived it through what they've done. They've done an incredible job, and it's been such a tough year, weather-wise. And I think weather-wise, people expect when you say a tough year to be, tidal waves and monsoons, but actually this year is we have had some really strong weather, but right now we're in these absolute doldrums where it's just hot and no wind, and it's like rowing through concrete. But keep going. You are doing a wonderful, wonderful job. And right now, you're beyond halfway, and all of a sudden, rather than just rowing away from land, suddenly you're rowing towards land. Every stroke is getting you closer to land. So keep doing what you're doing, and look forward to seeing their arrival in Antigua.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. And I think, from our angle, we've never had such a big fundraiser. We've never had such a sort of big community event. It's been really inspiring from a charity perspective, just to kind of, and the people that you meet. I think we've met, people that we would never necessarily get to meet, and just sort of discovering this whole ocean rowing community and how awesome you are and how, on hand you are to help and support and encourage us as well as at the charity. So it's been a really humbling, amazing, inspiring experience from all of us, and we're just blown away, so captivated, and sort of feels like friendships are really formed for life, which is fantastic. So just thank you, and thank you for your time today as well, both of you. Really, really appreciate it from all of us at Lyme Disease UK. So thank you, and we'll keep in touch as we follow their journey.
Thanks
Brilliant.
very much
Thank
for
you.
talking to us.
Thank you.